Welcome to Inside Coverage. It's the why and the how behind what's going on in the NFL behind the scenes. I'm Frank Schwab of Yahoo Sports, joined by Yahoo senior NFL writer Charles Robinson. A reminder, Inside Coverage now available on its own feed. Subscribing to it, leaving us a review would be really, really cool. Appreciate that. Charles has been on the training camp tour. He's in luxurious Latrobe, Pennsylvania. Great time to be there in August, I guess. Let's just get to it, Charles. I want to get to the news here. Haason Reddick and the Jets. Look, Haason Reddick traded, obviously, by the Eagles to the Jets and said, well, I want a new contract. The Jets said, well, we're taking a hard line. This week, Haason Reddick finally rubber met the road, said, I want a trade request. So the Jets said, nah, we're not doing that for you. To you, how does this end up? Where does this go? It just seems like this is just a stalemate and nothing's going to happen here.
Well, before we launch into this, you knew I wasn't gonna. We weren't gonna get. We're gonna inject a little something into the start of this. It's been a while. Number one, it's been a while since I've been on the podcast. Okay, it's been forever. Yeah. I'm on camp number 17 and still have not been on the pod at this point, largely because of my schedule. But this is the first time I think I've ever been on a show where you have been in the driver's seat, and it feels like. It feels like Han Solo letting Chewbacca take the wheel of the Millennium Falcon. Like,
what's again? Yeah, something against Chewbacca now? Come on, I can do this. Jason Fitz, by the way, on a long deserved break this week. That's why I get hosting duties. I'm surprised they do trust me with this because this is just, I will drive this off the road. You know this. I know this. Yeah.
Yeah. When I saw the rundown, I'm like, okay,
when you're the more responsible of the group, that is a bad sign. That is a really, really bad sign. But hey, they throw me a bone here and there.
Well, now that we got that out of the way,
Haason Reddick, what's going to happen? I just view this as a total.
Sure.
This is a mess right now to be happening in mid-August.
Yeah. So, what's interesting is I've been through Jets camp. I've been through Eagles camp, and so you definitely get a global view of sort of what has happened here or where this is going, and I really think when this went sideways between the Jets and Reddick, it was. He's acquired. He goes through the press conference, the initial press conference, where he was very complimentary of the situation. Like he looked like he wanted to be aboard. He made this remark about, being in there and whatever happens, and all these different things.
Right. And which you have to say in that situation. Sure.
Certainly. Yeah, absolutely. But I think what ended up happening was the Jets were of the mind that, okay, we're going to negotiate and we're going to get this deal done, which is unusual. Typically teams, when they deal for a player like this, you do it with a contract in mind. And I think the Jets have taken some flack for that, but that is also why this was a 2026 draft pick. I think the Jets made this trade knowing, hey, there's some danger here because we still have to work out this contract. And I think the Jets, their approach was, we're going to deal for him. He's going to come into the offseason program and we will negotiate basically as we move up toward the season. And then what ended up happening was Reddick had the press conference, took his physical, and then wasn't part of anything. And I think it spoiled the milk a little bit. I think the Jets were like, wait a minute, this guy wants a top level pass rusher contract. He wants to be paid in the neighborhood of $25 million north a season, which puts him among the elites, and he's had a number of double-digit sack seasons. He's approaching 30. There's a number of reasons why Reddick wants that kind of a deal. But I think the Jets thought, we're going to do this with him taking part of our offseason program. And then it didn't happen. And I think for the Jets, it was like, wait a minute, we're not doing this kind of a contract negotiation if we can't have you on hand, taking part in things. I think they approached it from, this is just how this is going to go. And Reddick was of the opposite mind, saying, nope, I'm not doing anything. I'm not showing up. And so it created this stalemate where when I talked to a number of people who are involved in the trade and kind of where it's at now, it was like, this has become a pride thing, right? Where the Jets are like,
I was going to say, with you talking about it, does this seem a little petty? Like, this is just, you didn't show up to the offseason workout, so we're not, I get what you're saying. I totally understand where they're coming from. But at some point, put that aside. Like,
Yeah,
you just got to get this done. You need this guy in camp. Like, this is a pass rusher you need on your defense.
they do. And Will McDonald did not develop physically, I think, this offseason the way that they had hoped. I think he would have added more bulk and been someone who, he needs to be a bigger player to be more of an every down player for them to open that opportunity to him. He reported very much at basically the same physique he had last season, which I don't want to say the Jets were disappointed, but certainly the thought process going into this offseason was that would come back, kind of a bigger, more physical, every down type of player. And I'm not sure that necessarily happened. So that puts a little bit of pressure on it. But I think the Jets, approaching it from their standpoint, we have a number of guys in the locker room who probably would want new deals. And now we're in a situation where, and this goes through all fans hate hearing this, but all front offices approach it this way. If a guy says, I'm not taking part in the offseason stuff after getting acquired, all these different things, and then now I'm not going to show up and I'm incurring fines and all this other stuff, the team approaches it like, okay, well, if we give into this, we've got 5 other guys who want new deals. Morgan Moses wants a new deal. There are a number of players who want new deals.
What happens when Sauce Gardner wants his?
Yep,
what happens when Garrett Wilson wants his?
Absolutely.
I get that. I totally get that. Let me ask you this, because just a very quick answer. Do you think Haason Reddick would just step away and not play football this year?
His contract will toll, so it would be a financial mistake. I mean,
So that said, what leverage does he have? If the Jets are serious about, we are not trading you,
right,
show up or else, he doesn't have any leverage, does he? He almost has to come in at some point.
He doesn't have any leverage until something occurs. Like, so let's say and right now, I'm telling you just from talking to people involved in this, it feels like it's going to be into the regular season, or at the very least, right to the doorstep of the regular season, where he will start to miss game checks for not reporting. And so I think the two things that would have to change for Reddick is, number one, there would have to be some veteran pressure inside the organization to lean on the front office and be like, hey, we got to get this guy in here. But the problem is there's no institutional memory for him. Aaron Rodgers doesn't know him. Like, even though Aaron Rodgers is going to talk to him and reach out and wants him there, it's not like this is a guy who's been in that locker room and people are, banging the drum the way they were for Chris Jones when he was holding out with the Kansas City Chiefs. Or he had, Chris obviously had the institutional track record there with the Chiefs, clearly. So he doesn't have that. So that's one. Or number two, let's say they go through the first week of the season and they get 0 pass rush pressure in game 1. And it's just like, hey, this is a huge hole now that needs to be addressed. Game 1 looked like a significant problem, and we have this pass rusher that ultimately we got to pay. So for it to change for Reddick, I think in terms of that leverage, because of these fines piling up, and he's going to go north of $2 million by the time the regular season starts. That's before game checks kick in. It would have to either be someone in that locker room, basically Aaron Rodgers, pressing and going, hey, can we please get this done? Or they play a game and it's just so clear they lack a pass rush.
But the opposite's true too. Let's say San Francisco, they go on the road, they beat the 49ers, which is possible. This is a very, very good team.
Sure.
Then all of a sudden it's like, okay, Haason, we don't really need you. Like, it's your call. You want to come in and collect your money? That's cool. But we don't really I think it works both ways that way.
It does. Absolutely. No, there's no question. Look, there's risk involved here. And right now, the one that is incurring the heaviest penalty is Reddick, because he's losing money every single day at a $50,000 clip.
And it just seems like it's going to end up with him playing, because he just has no other options if the Jets want to take this hard line.
And Frank, I will say this, talking to people in the organization, I asked a very specific question. I said, look, if this guy takes it all the way in the regular season, misses a game or whatever, is there a path back between these two sides? They feel like there is. They feel like, look, it's not going to be, the bridges aren't totally blown up. If this gets done and the money gets where, if there's a compromise where it needs to be, everything will be okay. But there's look, it's August 14th. There's a long way to go.
Yeah, long way to go. And I mean, pass rusher is one of those positions where I think you can join midstream. I think about Montez Sweat last year at the Bears, comes in, makes an immediate impact. Like you can, it's not quarterback, where you need this. Let me just ask you real quick before we move on. Just give me a prediction. You know people there. I won't hold you to it, but based on what you know, when does Haason Reddick report, or is it not with the Jets? What do you think happens here?
I don't think the Jets will deal him.
I don't either.
I think they're going to hang on to him because they need him. And, I would be surprised if he missed game checks. So I think there's a chance that basically we're talking about the Sunday before the regular season begins, Haason Reddick ultimately ends up reporting. And if not, I don't think it goes any deeper than missing like one game check.
Which I think would be honestly a great resolution for the Jets. I think they'd be pretty happy with that, even if it takes Haason Reddick, 2-3 weeks to kind of get back in football shape and all that. It's kind of stuff you need. Let's move on to the next big news of the week, and that comes out of the Minnesota Vikings. Rookie quarterback JJ McCarthy looks great in his debut. I thought he really, really played well. And all of a sudden, he's having some knee soreness. They take a look. He's got a torn meniscus. We don't know yet the timetable for when he might be back, if it's the minor surgery or if it's the major, out for some months type of surgery. Either way, he's going to miss some time. Sam Darnold is going to start the opener. Not that was much question. What do you know about this situation where you think it doesn't this set McCarthy back pretty far? I know people say like, oh, he wasn't going to play much anyway as a rookie. I don't really agree with that. I think he was going to play a lot as a rookie because Sam Darnold. This is a pretty big setback for a kid, isn't it?
Oh, it's a big setback. I mean, look, there's bare minimum 3 more weeks of reps that he was going to get, right? And they were rotating with that first team offense when I went through with JJ McCarthy and Sam Darnold. So there's a ton of first team practice reps that you're talking about. There's a ton of preseason reps because he would have played in these preseason games, at the very least against the Cleveland Browns in the second game of the preseason. And as you said, I mean, he was very impressive in the debut. He makes a mistake, but then if you watch the totality of the game, he got better and better and better as that game went along, which is the staff was overjoyed. They're like, this is exactly what we need to see from him. Make a mistake, bounce back, and then get better. Improve as you go, which he has done. I think he's done that in practice. It's been a little bit of a roller coaster up and down. To be completely frank, the day I was in was not his best day of practice. I thought Sam Darnold had a better day of practice the day I was there. I think what now we're looking at is, yes, it makes one element of the decision easier for the Minnesota Vikings, being that JJ McCarthy is not going to be the starter. Clearly, when the Vikings kick the season off, there's going to be a mental rep situation. There's going to be a rehab situation. We don't know, as you said, once they do surgery, they're going to figure out how much damage is there to the meniscus and really how prolonged the recovery is going to be. But I would expect bare minimum. What are we talking? 4 weeks? Potentially
and also,
6 weeks?
Rob, whatever the high end of the recovery scale is, add a couple weeks, because they're going to be so careful with this kid, as they've been just in talking in terms of his development. I mean, they've said at every single turn, like, no, Sam's starting. We don't want to rush this kid in. So if it's, let's say, 4 to 6 weeks, it's 6 to 8, and it's probably more like 8 to 10, because they're just not going to rush him back.
I would cut off the first half of the regular season. Yeah. Bottom line. Like, I just would.
Even if it's a minor. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Because I think one of the things when I went through, there was dedication to, we're going to be patient here. We're not, yes, okay. There's competition going on in camp. We want JJ to push to start, but there was clear, not only from the coaching staff, but also the front office, it was, we are going to do this right. There's going to be an element of patience. There's a reason why Sam Darnold is here and we're comfortable with him. And so even if this knee injury doesn't occur, let's say he's on that trajectory. Does he push to potentially start far earlier than they thought? Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I was sitting there watching that preseason opener, and every time he's throwing a good pass, I'm saying it's going to get to September, and every time Sam Darnold throws an interception, everybody's going to be saying, oh, why aren't you starting this kid? We traded up to the 10th pick to get him, and he looked great in the preseason. That pressure's gone now.
Yeah, well, and on the flip side of that, he was building confidence. And that's the thing, is where now you've taken away the confidence that gets built through repetition, through improving, through making mistakes and coming back from it, not just doing mental reps, all the film breakdowns. It's just a multitude of things now that he's not going to have at his fingertips. And frankly, this is the first time for JJ McCarthy. I mean, going all the way back to college, I mean, this is the first time he's really run into this kind of a situation where an injury is going to absolutely set him to the side, and seeing how he responds to this is going to be a big deal. But I will say, at the very least, the one upside to this is it was not a situation like let's say if this happened to a Jayden, a Jayden Daniels in Washington, like they were not starting this guy from the jump, right? The plan was to always be patient. This is a hitch. It's a problem at the beginning. But if JJ McCarthy, and this is what I would stress to the Vikings fan base, if JJ McCarthy is your starter, let's say by the end of the season, let's say this heals, he comes back out, practice, gets back into practice, he's going to be taking second team reps. If they can get him though to the point where he's back on that trajectory, to knowing by the end of his rookie season, okay, this is our guy, we're rolling with him moving forward in 2025, then really not that much, I think, has dramatically changed.
Let me ask you, there's a flip side to this too. I don't think McCarthy is going to see any meaningful starts this year. I just, all the things you talked about them bringing him along slowly and then needing to get him reps back, sometime in December, maybe, it makes sense that way. What do you think of Sam Darnold? Because here's a guy who, again, he was a better prospect than JJ McCarthy was and failed at the Jets, but that was a terrible situation. Failed at Carolina. That was probably even a worse situation. He didn't really get a shot last year with San Francisco because Purdy lit the world on fire. Obviously got one start. Now he's in a really good spot. I look at this as Kevin O'Connell, great offensive coach. You're throwing to the best receiver on the planet, Justin Jefferson. You got other dudes, Addison, Hawkinson when he comes back, better running game. This is a pretty good situation for Sam Darnold. You saw him in camp. What do you think of him and his problem? And now he doesn't have the pressure over his shoulder. He doesn't, every time he throws an interception, he's not going to have the whole, Bank of America Stadium or whatever they're calling it, chanting for JJ McCarthy. I think this is actually a really good thing for Sam Darnold. Not that he wanted it, but this is going to be a positive. What do you think of Darnold and his prospects this year?
Well, the Vikings, there's no doubt, they're hoping this is a double dip situation, meaning that, hey, we get something out of Darnold, he becomes an asset for us, but we know the future's JJ. But we can potentially get something out of Darnold at some point during the course of this season, kind of see where that goes. When I talked to the Viking staff, I think one of the interesting things in the conversations I had was, a staffer made a point to me, someone on their coaching staff said, he was in a terrible situation right up until he got to San Francisco. And then once he started working with Kyle, things changed in terms of how he played, what he brought to the table, his, his ability to learn what is a complicated offense with Kyle Shanahan and have a little bit of mastery with it pretty quickly, enough to earn the backup quarterback spot in a situation where they were dying to not trade Trey Lance. San Francisco was, and he just showed I'm your best option here. You got to get rid of this guy. Ultimately, they do that. So I think for the Vikings, it was encouraging that when they looked along his timeline, they said, well, what was the best situation he was in? It was in San Francisco. Did he get better? Well, that's when he got better as a player. And so, he continues, I think, obviously, particularly in terms of the offense, he goes into a very similar offense in Minnesota, has that under his belt, going through the San Francisco experience. And I think he's got an opportunity here. I'm not going to say he's going to pull the Geno Smith, but that's in the mind of the Vikings. There's no question. They sit and look at Geno Smith and go, started off his career in a really bad situation, then went through a number of better situations where he was behind really high-level veterans, watched guys, how they did their work, how they developed. He saw a number of different offenses. And then he got into Seattle and got some continuity in terms of the system and with a locker room. And I do think they think Sam Darnold could potentially have that kind of a path as an NFL player where he does become a serviceable starter in the league, and this could potentially be part of it. They don't want that to be in Minnesota long term, but for what is happening right now, this is part of why you go and get this guy.
I think the biggest upset in all that is you mentioned Trey Lance and didn't troll me at all, so I appreciate that. Let's move along to the one more thing. The Cowboys. We got to talk to Cowboys. We got to talk Jerry Jones. We got to talk CeeDee Lamb. Jerry Jones comes out and says, there's no urgency to get a deal done. CeeDee Lamb laughs at that. The next day, Jerry has to do a mea culpa. Why do we take Jerry seriously? He just says weird stuff. What I want to know is, look, nobody's talking about him. I'm talking about CeeDee Lamb or JaMarr Chase missing games, but both of these guys are sitting out. It's mid-August. Is there any possibility that CeeDee Lamb's not in the field week 1? Is there any possibility JaMarr Chase is not in the field week 1? And I'm not just asking for my fantasy drafts coming up, Charles.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's definitely
a possibility. Too. I don't think anybody's talking about this, and even if, let's talk about with CeeDee specifically, let's say he reports Wednesday before week 1. What is that? He's not going to play 70 snaps, right?
Right. we talked about Reddick earlier in the pod, and this is a different situation. These are guys who have real leverage in terms of institutional knowledge. People know the player that they are, and they also know what the offenses look like when you take these guys now off the field. And the difference with Reddick is the deal Reddick lands, or where this is ultimately going for Reddick, it has the ability to make up some of the pain that is incurred with fines. CeeDee Lamb and JaMarr Chase, they're on the Chris Jones track, where what they do can make up any of the problems they had. Fine-wise, they can afford to sit out, to miss game checks, to do things where they are losing a significant, particularly CD, because CD is just not there at all, where he can lose a significant amount of money. He can do a deal that is at the top of the wide receiver heap in the first
real quick,
week
Charles,
of the
if
season.
I'm not mistaken, on a rookie deal, you can excuse fines. You cannot do it for veterans, but you
can't do it for veterans, but you can for rookie deals. Yeah,
which they would
correct.
do, obviously. I think
that's
for each of these guys, that would happen.
Yeah. So, I mean, it is, as you said, it's a different situation, dealing with the rookie. But I'm talking beyond fines. You can't forgive missed game checks. That's what I'm talking about here. So if you have a situation where CeeDee Lamb comes in and says, I'm going to skip a game, he's going to lose that money. Like, it is what it is. But as you said, he's also on a rookie deal. It's not a situation like, let's say Chris Jones, he was on a veteran deal when he skipped a game, right? That's far more painful. CeeDee Lamb can go ahead and miss some game checks if he has to ultimately get this resolved, and the next deal he signs is more than going to make up for whatever he misses.
Yeah, he's going to be in that 35 million range, same as JJ. Like,
no question.
And that's why this has been so dumb for Jerry Jones. Like, waiting never helps. Like, the price is never going to go down. Really,
Frank? They disagree. They disagree. So.
But why? Like, what upside is there been? Like, the price always goes up. It always goes up.
But they don't believe that. So, and I'll give you, I will tell you, Stephen Jones straight up said when I was there, standing there talking to Stephen Jones about this whole situation, and he said, well, that's not always true. He said, we did Zach Martin last year, and do you think Zach got what he initially asked for? No. That price was not where it was when Zach initially wanted his deal adjusted. So in their minds, they're like, it doesn't necessarily always go up. It's and they know what the situation is. Steven straight up said, look, we've got a quarterback who's wants $60 million. We've got two other guys who want to be the highest paid non-quarterback in the game, which is 35. They know they're going to have to pay out this money, but how they dole it up is really what ultimately matters. So I do think there's an element here of saying, let's see if things change the closer we get to the season, and the longer this goes, let's see if things, start to slide in our favor once he's potentially missing it. I don't think it. I think it's precarious for them.
I can't imagine it goes. The price of the brick is going up. Let's put it that way. Real quick. Do you think either of these guys get deals? I'm talking about JaMarr Chase and CeeDee Lamb. I know we've talked a lot about CeeDee because it's the Cowboys, but you think either of these guys get the long-term deal before opening day? Because Mike Brown came out and said with the Bengals, we really don't want to negotiate anymore. That's for the offseason. Well, I know that's dumb and people negotiate all the time. Do you think either long-term deal gets done before the season or do either of these guys miss time?
I don't think the Bengals, because of who Mike Brown is and how he's dealt financially with things before and where this is going, I think there's a chance this does not get done going into the regular season. Yeah. And I think there's still a chance that the posture that the Bengals take is, we'll just use the franchise tag. Fine. We're not going to get this done. We'll franchise tag this guy when it comes to that
worse. It just gets worse. I know.
I'm just saying that is the posture ultimately I think he will trot out. I do think there's a chance that the Cowboys get done. And one of the things that makes me optimistic about this is, you go through, like I said, I'm on Camp 17, and you go through these other front offices and you talk to all these general managers, and had a chance to talk to a GM who's always dialed in on these things, always calls contracts right, always kind of knows when things are starting to move. And he said to me, and it was fairly recently, he said to me, I think the CeeDee Lamb deal gets done probably inside the next 10 days. We're still in that window. It's pushing, we're in the window of what he thought, but his confidence in it, and it's been someone who's done a ton of deals, leads me to believe, he's typically right when he calls these things. So he tends to believe it's going to get done before the season starts.
So out of Dak, CeeDee, Micah Parsons, how many of these guys are Cowboys in 2025? Like, are they going to be able to get all three back? I don't see a way. I really don't. I think I'm starting to think that Dak is the guy who just kind of, they can't, because his price is going to be 60 million plus by the time he gets his leverage.
If Dak is not done, okay, and the Cowboys are very clear about this when you talk to them, that there's no end date on it right now, that there's no expiration on negotiating, and,
sure.
And they'll continue to say that until Dak comes out and says, here is the end date. Someone puts an end date out there from the standpoint of Dak himself and his representation. They continue to believe that they can get this deal done, maybe even to the season. I don't think so. I think if the regular season starts, I think Dak is no longer a Cowboy after the 2024 season, unless something crazy, basically the Cowboys go, oh my God, wait, this was a huge mistake. Now we're going to come and it's going to be even more than, we're talking more than 60 million APY, whatever, or Dak has some kind of change of heart. But I tend to believe the two that I have the most confidence sticking are ultimately CeeDee Lamb and Micah down the line. And I think if they have to employ a franchise tag at some point, like let's say on a Micah, I think they would do that and then slug it out in negotiations. But the one that's the most precarious is Dak, but he plays into that too. And I think he knows, and everybody across the league knows, if he goes to free agency, he absolutely 100% is getting $60 million a year.
Easy.
And he's going to have more opportunities than maybe people think. And there may even be some teams right now where you don't perceive Dak Prescott as being someone that franchise will pursue, that Dak will get pursued by that franchise. And
we're all talking about the Raiders, but what about a Seattle? What about the Jets? What about, all these teams that really don't have solidified futures at quarterback. Yeah. If you get a bidding war going on, it is going way above 60. It would blow people's minds, I think. Let's take a quick break and we will come back and talk about rookie quarterbacks and how they looked at week one of the preseason. All right, Charles, the big story coming in the preseason, at least in my mind, was you got 6 first-round quarterbacks. And I think the big story coming out of week one was all of them look good. Drake Maye didn't play much, but, you saw Jayden Daniels in person, had that beautiful, beautiful pass. They didn't do a lot with him because I know they had tackle issues as far as injuries go. But when he did throw the ball, looked good, ran for a touchdown. Caleb looked awesome. Bo Nix looked great. These rookie quarterbacks all look like the real deal. Stinks about JJ McCarthy.
Right.
Am I right about this? Like, I'm not just seeing things, right? Like, all of these guys look pretty darn good in week one.
Well, I said it was funny because, I was talking to a GM about the 2021 class that crashed and burned, right? And he just straight up said to me, he's like, this is not the same deal at all. And he was like, look, we didn't know those guys coming out of COVID. He was like, we just didn't. We did not have the ability.
I never thought about that angle. That's interesting.
He said he was like, and it wasn't just quarterback. He was like, it was across the board. He was like, the receivers you didn't know. He was like, the offensive line. There were just a multitude of guys that you really didn't get to know them as people and competitors the way normally you would. You didn't have a chance to put them through paces where you were pressuring them in situations where you're sitting in a room and you're throwing them curveballs and all these different things. And he said that dramatically really did affect some of the decisions made in that class. And he said, this is completely different. He said, some of the players in this quarterback class obviously have had a ton of college starts. He said some of them have gone through, he said 3 of these guys went through significant adversity in college between Jayden Daniels, between Michael Penix, and Bo Nix in terms of obviously having to change schools, but injuries. And he's like, look, they're quarterbacks who have some sand to them, who know what it's like to experience problems and have to push through to the other side. And then you have Caleb Williams, who is exquisitely talented, was in a bit of a fishbowl last year, so did experience some of that. And then, Drake Maye is the one. And then, JJ McCarthy, who we talked about, was in a program with a wackadoodle head coach in Jim Harbaugh, which is, I'm telling you, it matters. Like
I'm
having,
sure it does.
like being in that program with that guy, he's a different head coach to function.
Michigan had a weird season last year. They should vacate that title, by the way. Whatever.
Sure. Okay. Whatever you say. And I'm not getting into that, but so it was like JJ McCarthy didn't just this idea. Well, he didn't. The Michigan offense was the way it was, and he didn't really do. No, he dealt with plenty inside that program, and did exactly what he was expected to do, and a multitude of different things. And honestly, Jim Harbaugh, we've seen, will tell the truth about a lot of different things when it comes to football. He will tell you what he likes. He will tell you what he truly believes in with certain players. And maybe all the sunshine he had about JJ McCarthy was not just BS. Maybe he was seeing a kid who did develop, showed the work ethic, all these different things. So there's that too. So I think, Drake Maye is probably the one interesting one where it was like the ceiling was projected so high before his final season at North Carolina. He gets into New England, and clearly I think the learning curve was a little more steep than people expected in the franchise. But when I went through New England, I can tell you this right now. They were like, dude, this is overblown. They're like, he is making gains in practice. Like, we can see him getting better over the course of this preseason. People are freaking out, and they just don't understand that the progress is there. We see it, and nothing has changed for us. Hey, everybody's having fun talking about Joe Milton and the first preseason game when he rips off some exciting runs, and there's the throws and the big arm and all these different things. He is sizably, significantly behind Drake Maye in that organization. People just need to relax on that. So yeah, I mean, it looks right now, the early returns, you have quarterbacks who are showcasing what made them good in college, the experience they arrived, to the NFL level with. And then some of them ended up in good, like, it's good that McCarthy's with Kevin O'Connell. It's good that Bo Nix is with Sean Payton. And by the way, when I went through Denver, I'm sitting with Sean Payton and I'm like, God, this guy seems relaxed right now. I'm like, this is great. Like this.
And that's what happens when you get a kid who has 61 career college starts. Like that is exactly why you draft that guy.
I thought to myself, I'm like, is this just because things were so crazy the last off season, the things he had said about Hackett, or was this? No, I think it's because he's like, okay, I got the quarterback I want. This is going the way, like we are finally to the point where we're beyond the starting line. And I think that had a lot to do with his kind of demeanor and where he's at right now with Nix. And I absolutely think in terms of when the season starts, I think Nix will be a starter out of the box. Obviously, Caleb's going to be a starter out of the box. Jayden's going to be a starter out of the box. And real quick, the Jayden thing, going through Washington.
I want to hear about Jayden because he's kind of please do.
So Jayden, obviously the first preseason game against the Jets, he checks out of that screen and he throws the go route. Beautiful ball to Dyami Brown. Amazing play. I am telling you, after that was over in that organization, there were some talks with that dude. Like they were as happy as they were that it worked out. And as happy as they were that players in the locker room were like, oh, this kid's like, he didn't want to take even an L on one play if he sees it coming. They were like, listen, man, our offensive line in that game, we're starting a backup guard at tackle. Like our offensive line was not prepared there's a reason why we are as conservative with our playing calling as possible in that situation. You have to understand you can't do that. And that, as happy as we were that it worked out, do not ever do that again. And it was the coaches, it was the front office. Like there was a lot of talk toward Jayden Daniels that like, we get it. We love that you're competitive, beautiful ball, all these things. Don't ever do that again. We are absolutely protecting you. And one last thing, I didn't even ask about him after the joints with the Jets, but I was talking with the Jets and unprompted, someone I was talking to with the Jets brought up Jayden Daniels and said, hey, 5 on the other side, that kid is a baller. As long as they can protect him, he's going to be a really good player.
And that's the big thing. Let me ask you about that because you went through that camp. I've been high on the Commanders. I think that they could be a real surprise team this year because of Jayden Daniels and all the changes they made. The one thing, though, that offensive line stinks, right?
Yes,
like that. Is that how much is that going to hinder not just the Commanders as a team this season, but Jayden Daniels' rookie year? You don't want to throw a rookie out there with a bad offensive line, but this might be a bottom 5 offensive line he's playing.
They're going to have to, there's going to have to be movement in the offense, in terms of like, it can't just be, hey, he's going to set up, behind the line and be able to operate. I would expect they're going to run the ball a lot. I would expect there's going to be a lot of heavy packages. As much as I love Ben Sinnott, their draft pick at tight end, I would not be surprised if he spends a fair amount of time as a rookie, as long as he develops the way he's going as an inline player who's blocking and doing a lot of short stuff for them in the offense. Look, Zach Ertz looked really good going through. It looks like he still has some juice as a pass catcher. But again, considering a lot of this is going to be predicated on protecting Jayden, I think they will really try to pare down the offense so he's not running around a lot. There's not a lot of, let's not do a ton of off script stuff. Okay. Like, we know you can do that. Not expecting that from you now. We have to be conservative early while we get this sorted out in front of you.
But it almost seems like he's got to do off-script stuff because he's going to be scrambling for his life. He had this incredibly high scramble rate at LSU and all that, and you just see that big part of his game, and I almost worry about him making bad habits out of that. Like, hey, I got to get out of it. You want a quarterback to stick in the pocket and then run when needed. And Lamar does a great job of that, for one example. If Jayden gets this idea in his head of, I got to scramble all the time, 1/5 of our plays are going to be scrambling around. I don't think that's great going into year 2. I just worry about how the offensive line affects everything else with Jayden Daniels and that team.
It's a real concern. It is. There's no, but again, they have Austin Eckler. They have Brian Robinson. They have depth in the backfield that I think they're happy with. And I do think that there will be a dedicated effort early on. Let's try to make sure we're running the ball and we're running the personnel packages, whether it's 2 tight ends or whatever else we have to do to make sure that we're protecting him as much as possible, and then scheming also to make sure. But the problem they will have is, again, his mentality as a competitor. Literally, it's your first drive of your entire NFL career.
I love it. Yes,
and they send in us. They send in a screen, and you're sitting there going, "No, wait, the box is completely packed. I'm not just gonna do like I know I'm not supposed to do this, but I'm gonna go ahead and check out of this and take the. I'm going for the win. I'm not gonna take this L on a play. That is going to be a conundrum they're going to deal with this season. Is trying to keep him from listening to the little, voice on his shoulder going, "Hey man, yeah. Let's go for it.
I love it because of this too, Charles. Like, I keep thinking back to Jory's story when she wrote about how the team was so impressed with his work ethic, and you look at that, you look at Hard Knocks Giants, where obviously Jayden's a really, really sharp kid. Not every rookie's able to identify that easily. Like, maybe they didn't want him checking out of that to a dangerous play, but the fact that he recognized that and what was it, third snap of the game, like if it was preseason debut, that speaks to Jayden Daniels too. I'm really, really excited about this kid. He's going to be a baller.
And then he knew it. He did it, and then he looks at the sideline with the Cheshire grin because he's like, I know I wasn't supposed to do that, and I totally just did it, and I know I'm gonna get in trouble for this.
It's Steph Curry shooting over the double team, right? Like whatever, it went in, didn't it?
I'm going for it.
Really quick before we move on, can we talk about Caleb a little bit? Because I'm not trying to put him in the Hall of Fame based on 2-3 possessions in the preseason against the Bills, but oh my goodness, like. Every reason he was the number 1 pick and kind of one of these like absolute no doubt number 1 picks on display in that game. He moved well. He threw from the pocket. He threw on the run. I mean, that throw to Komet is like, all right, you have a top 5 arm in the NFL. Like, I mean, it was awesome to see him on the field and play as well as he did. I get it. It doesn't matter. It's preseason, but just seeing the skills, how impressed were you? This kid's going to be like legit from day one, right?
I go back to the pre-draft when I don't even remember what story it was I was working on, but I remember someone, a personnel individual telling me like it's like Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers had a baby. Like you see these elements of the Aaron arm, like the things that just
throw to Komet. I just can't get it out of my head. Like that was. Shoo, I yelled out loud in my living room. I was like, whoa.
But then you also see. Like, and as wonderful as that was, he's gonna do some wild stuff.
Oh yeah.
He's going to do the Brett Favre where he's off
Favre.
platform taking some crazy risks, and there's going to be some turnovers and
the play to Swift. I mean, he looks at it like he's Magic Johnson. Like that was
like
crazy.
It's not even and somebody's going to get you at some point on some of that stuff, and that will be part of his development process. But as you said, I think, I don't remember who it was. Somebody was predicting like once the season started, they're like, just wait. I guarantee you, first week of training camp, we're going to start seeing clips popping up on social media of these throws that I think it was first practice. It was like, this is Caleb throw. Look at this Caleb throw. Look at this Caleb throw. Like, the arm talent is what it is. Like, if anything, I think Chicago probably for the first time, and I will not put Jay Cutler in this box because of what his demeanor was established already at that point in the NFL. They have a quarterback who has the ability to be an absolute superstar in the league, and it took him zero amount of time to showcase why.
Zero. Like, every skill on display. Again, Chicago's not had a first-team All-Pro quarterback since 1950. This kid could break that streak.
Like, they've never had a quarterback throw for 30 touchdowns.
I know. Crazy. It's on all the stats, all the 4,000 yards and all that. Jordan Love would have the highest, single season record for the Bears history, all that kind of stuff. It's ending with Caleb Williams. Like, I'm sorry. Like, that was just, and I'm trying not to get too excited off the preseason, but man, he really, really looked good. Great stuff out of rookie quarterbacks. We're going to take one more break, wrap things up with Charles Robinson and myself, Frank Schwab. All right, Charles, you've been to how many? You said 17?
17 today with the Steelers. I'm not out there yet. But
before we get to this never-ending Brandon Aiyuk story, what stood out? Like, tell me. I haven't really been talking to you. You've been busy as heck. I have been reading every one of your notebooks. For people who have not read these notebooks you're writing from the road, they're on X, formerly Twitter. Just incredibly dense information. Like, you put in so much in there. I'm impressed with them. But tell me what, I've read them all, but what has impressed you most? What has stood out of, I didn't know this. Everybody should know this going into the season. I'm picking your brain. What you got?
Well, I mean, we already talked about the rookie quarterbacks. I mean, I've seen a number of those guys, and I think part of what I'm encouraged by is that you do see an element of teams wanting to be patient, with some of these guys in terms of like how the games will be called or, when they will or won't start. The one thing I think that has been a nonstop conversation from beginning to end is just contracts. Like, every team is talking about like where money is going with quarterbacks, where money is going with wide receivers. One of the consistent questions I asked, and I'm going to end up writing a story on this eventually, is just how we got here with wide receiver money. Because again, this was historically, as long as I've covered the league, we're talking decades here, and you're in the same boat. I mean, it was, you pay quarterbacks, left tackles, edge rushers who actually get to the quarterback, and corners who shut down, follow and shut down players. And now, no, it's wide receiver. That is the super premium paid position outside of quarterback, despite the fact that we are in a historic era of wide receivers and drafts every single year from this point forward because of the saturation of 7-on-7 football and how players are developed at lower levels. There will always be high level, even in bad, like next year's supposed to be a bad draft. Watch, there will still be receivers in next year's draft.
100%.
And so one of the things that I think was really interesting is when I asked, how did we get here? One contract that has popped up repeatedly from one team to the next was the deal that Amon-Ra St. Brown signed with the Lions. Because I think teams, and again, it all depends on structure and what is the deal in terms of like real money and teams are like, stop looking at APY. You look at APY too much, all that, but they do too. And I think when Amon-Ra did that deal, the thought, I think, in a number of franchises was like 30 million plateau was special. Like, you were a truly special player to crack the 30 million plateau.
Yep.
Either you ran like nobody did, or you were the complete package, like no one has seen, all these different things. And when Amon-Ra did the deal, there were front offices, like there was one GM who was like, he's not, just like sidewise, he's not special. Speed-wise, he's not special. He is a good player for them. But for this guy to now be put in basically that plateau, and we're only talking a few $1 million that separates it. I get that. But for him to be put in that plateau opens the door to a litany of other good but not great receivers who are going, I'm as good as Amon-Ra. my money should be right there on par with that guy. And so I think, interestingly enough, I do think that Detroit deal disrupted a little bit negotiations across the league, not only in this offseason, but also projecting forward for teams. I think they know that a Amon-Ra deal is going to be something that a lot of agents point to. And I think the thought too in front offices is that Detroit had pressure. The front office had pressure to get that deal done because they had the draft event that was coming, and other front offices were hearing that ownership was basically saying, I want to get the Penei Sewell deal done and I want to get the Amon-Ra deal done so that when this draft event shows up, we can announce, leading up to it, that we've got these guys signed and there's all this positivity. Well, if ownership really wants to get deals done, it puts front offices in situations where they're like, got to kind of remove some of these hurdles and just go ahead and do the deals so we can get it done. So it's remarkable to me, the number of teams, when you ask them about financially where we're going, particularly at the wide receiver spot, how they clamped onto the Amon-Ra deal pretty quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And a perfect segue. You are such a professional. Let's talk Brandon Aiyuk, because the reports coming out that he's a $30 million a year guy, that struck me. I didn't expect that. I can't lie.
Gee, Frank, the Amon-Ra deal wasn't factored into that one at all, was it?
Like all of a sudden, it changes the game for everybody. Look, we're taping this on Wednesday morning. Brandon Aiyuk might be with the Steelers or the 49ers or the Saskatchewan Roughriders by the afternoon. We don't know. That this story just keeps going on and on and on. What do we know right now? Tell me, why hasn't anything happened? I have my own opinions on this, but go ahead. What do you know? Brain dump for me, Brandon Aiyuk.
I think that the Niners they're pounding out the finite details, and I would percentage-wise, and it's funny because when this will come out, I'll probably be totally wrong. I'll probably
hey,
be
I'm
literally
all the time. You're fine.
I will hours,
yeah.
2 hours from now, I'll be standing on the field with the Steelers when they get the deal done to get Amon-Ra or to get Brandon Aiyuk on the roster. But I will just tell you, when I went through 49ers camp, and Aiyuk was doing that thing where maybe he'd make an appearance in a shirt and shorts or whatever. All that stuff was going on. The sense I got, and what I would have told you on the podcast if we had talked early on in my camp tour, I would have said, I get the feeling the 49ers are going to let this play out to the point where eventually they're going to go, okay, see who's out there for you. Go ahead. Like, it's fine. See what teams are on the table for you. See where the finances are, because I think the 49ers knew the same thing that I think they understand the mindset of other teams, and it's that we don't really want to do a $30 million deal with Brandon Aiyuk either. However, we're desperate.
Amon-Ra St. Brown,
right? Yeah, but Amon-Ra St. Brown, and that really, I think, threw a wrench in the negotiations with the Brandon Aiyuk. And so I think the idea was, will there be some teams that are desperate to add a wide receiver piece and they view him as a long-term cornerstone? Will they offer him 30 APY? Yes. Will the structure matter? Yes. Will the cash flow matter? Yes. There will be a lot of different, but what will the quality of those teams be, or the cities or the situations? What will those be? And could that potentially open another window for us with Brandon Aiyuk? I think that's how the 49ers were approaching this all along. And I think ultimately it played out the way that they thought. Okay, the Cleveland Browns, and I'm going to be careful how I put this. The Cleveland Browns definitely had a trade offer on the table that would clearly the San Francisco 49ers, it was in their wheelhouse in terms of what they wanted. They wanted a wide receiver back. I believe Amari Cooper would have gone to the San Francisco 49ers.
Which I think would be actually a pretty good deal for the 49ers.
Yeah. And I believe a second-round pick would have gone to the 49ers, and I believe a fifth-round pick would have gone to the 49ers. I believe that deal ultimately would have happened, and I think Aiyuk would have gotten his $30 million a season. I think that it was too rich for a team like the Patriots. I think the complication with the Steelers is the draft assets you have to send back, although clearly they've worked out a framework of enough of a package that it's kept the 49ers now engaged that, okay, the Steelers are a possibility. And then, there's this sort of the structure of the money. Will he get 30? Yeah, he can get 30, but what's the structure and cash flow going to look like? Once all this was laid on the table, then the 49ers are like, okay, so here's where we are. We're going to come closer to the number that you ultimately want. We know about the Amon-Ra deal. and you get to stay here. And we are in a Super Bowl window, and you are a massive part of that Super Bowl window. And although they can't say it, I think the reality is down the line, between Debo and Brandon Aiyuk, one of those guys is not going to be on the roster, let's say I'll say 2026, right?
Okay.
I think it'll probably be Debo, right? Debo's going to be the guy that they ultimately end up moving off of down the line. It may not happen after this year. I think it's more likely to happen after, say, a 2025 season. But I just think the 49ers are like, let's play this out. And with the knowledge that the coaching staff has handled this the right way. Every time Kyle has seen Brandon Aiyuk, hey, man, what's up, big dog? Hug, what's up? Hey, let's get you out. We'll get you out here. Let's keep working at this. Let's not abandon this. John Lynch, same deal. Like, it's not, there's not been bad blood. So, like, let's let it play out. And then put him in a situation where he's like, could I leave? Yes. Could I leave for an unfamiliar place? Yes. Could I leave for a quarterback situation that right now is completely jacked up in Pittsburgh? I'm, with all due respect to what Justin Fields has shown, Russell Wilson's been down, but it's not a great quarterback situation there. There's familiarity. There's organizationally, the cards are stacked for San Francisco. And I think ultimately you're sitting there and you're looking at Aiyuk and saying, you're going to give it up for a mil and a half APY. And by the way, who's to say we can't adjust your deal in 2026 or 2025? Like, who's to say we can't give you a salary bump a little further down the line, or throw in an extra incentive or something that we can't work out something to help you get cash on the back end of this deal. So I think it's worked out the way the 49ers expected. I think personally, and I'm prepared to be completely wrong in this, and I hate making these proclamations, I would be more surprised if he's not a 49er by Friday, right? And that he's not staying there. But that to me is probably the rubber stamp that he's going to be a Steeler, and I'll literally be on the field today when it happens.
I think the big breakthrough here was that Aiyuk was getting these $30 million, whatever it is, and he wasn't necessarily jumping at it. It didn't get done. So that had to lead to 49ers to believe that this just isn't a money grab. Like, he does care about the situation. Right. He does ultimately want to be here. So Frank, if we come in at 29 or whatever,
Frank, let me tell you what this hold-in was, right? Mm-hmm. He kept going to all the meetings.
Yeah.
He wasn't just in the building with the 49ers. He was still going to everything. He was going to all the meetings. He was doing lift. He was doing, it was literally the only thing he wasn't doing was on the field. Because, some hold-ins, guys don't do anything.
Nothing.
They come in, they go, I'm hurt. I ain't going to class. I'm not going to be I'm in the building. I'm in the building.
College, we're not going to class.
I'll be sitting in my locker on my phone, whatever. No. He
Engaged.
Went to every single thing. And when you go through there, you're like, isn't really, this feels more like just a big string of vet days than a hold.
Let me ask you one more question, because this has been on my mind. Maybe it just doesn't matter because the cap keeps going up and up. Can the 49ers afford this? They're paying so many guys right now and have to pay other guys that are coming up. Can the 49ers really afford to pay Brandon Aiyuk in the neighborhood of $30 million?
The Eagles are doing it somehow.
Yeah, I guess. That's true.
It's true. Although I told Joy Epstein, we were texting, kind of laughing about how he keeps doing this, and I'm like, I'm still 23% sure that Howie is running some kind of salary cap Ponzi scheme, and that in 2037 Howie's going to retire, and in 2038 there's going to be a $2.6 billion cap hit. There's some kind of
crazy. It's crazy that they're paying both guys and the quarterback.
Here's the thing though too, and this has nothing it is a complete aside to everything, but it is definitely a massive amount of talk in the league office with the union, all these different things. The 18th game is coming. It's one way or another, this is going to end up happening. They're going to opt out of their television deals. And already you've seen that the cap has been taking these big leaps every single year, but they're going to opt out of their television deals going into 2028. They're going to rework that deal. The salary cap is going to skyrocket after the next television deals that ultimately get run, as long as the economy isn't in the tank. But let's remember, the last time they hammered out a CBA and TV deals and all this stuff, COVID was like going on. So like,
Right.
there,
Right.
it's the money is going up. Teams, like, is there a time where you got to pay the piper? Yeah, but so far, the Eagles are figuring out a way to deal with that window. The Niners will too. The rotation you will see, like the Eagles, is down the line. One half of the football, probably defense, I would guess. You'll see a big rotation of younger players, and they'll start to make some decisions where they're walking away from bigger contracts. But that's a few years off.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting, and we just both hope that this gets done. Like, hey, come on, let's be done with the Brandon Aiyuk drama, huh?
I'm still on the road, man. I don't know. Whatever.
I hear ya. And that's what I was gonna say. You got to go enjoy lovely Latrobe, Pennsylvania. So let's get out of here. Thanks to our producer Stone behind the scenes. Appreciate him humoring me, letting me host the show, letting me get behind the wheel for the first. I've done this a couple times. It's fun. It's just different. Jason Fitz does a much better job, and he will be back. I'm Yahoo Schwab on Twitter. He's Charles Robinson on Twitter. Please sign up for a Yahoo Fantasy Football League this year while you're at it. Be automatically entered a chance to win $1 million. Details are at yahoo.com/fantasymillion. We will be back next week, Charles. Do God's work on the road still. We will talk to you soon. Thanks, everybody, for hanging out with us.